This young man devoted his entire life to his family, sacrificed his dreams and even his own happiness for their sake. But he met a miserable end, betrayed and killed by his own brother right in front of their father. Earlier, he had asked the man standing before him why he had come. The answer came cold and without hesitation. He was here to strike him down. In that moment, the truth became undeniable. From the very beginning, this man had intended to use the entire unit as nothing more than a decoy to discard them once their role was complete. The man looked down on him and spoke with contempt, stating that this was the only use a wingless creature like him could ever have. He mockingly asked whether he was not his foolish son, Ashine. The House of Elmhine was the continent's premier military lineage, a family that had served as the sword and shield of the royal family for generations. At its head stood Roderick Elmhine, the only man in the country who possessed all 7 wings, and wings were a crest engraved upon the back. The more wings one possessed, the greater the magic power hidden within their body. Only those with wings were capable of wielding magic within the Elmhine household. Years ago, when he had been on the verge of death during a brutal blizzard, Roderick had saved him, believing that his life had been spared for a reason. Ash devoted everything he had to repaying that debt. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, he was never acknowledged. His brothers mocked him endlessly, calling him wingless because he lacked the crest that defined their bloodline. Even so, Ash endured. He trained day and night, believing that one day his devotion would be rewarded. That belief shattered during this mission. On that night, Ash's unit had been surrounded from all sides. Now he understood. They had been sent here to die. Ash demanded an answer. He asked whether this was truly the end of the loyalty he had shown all his life, whether this betrayal was his father's final response. Roderick answered coldly. He asked what expectations a mere tool could possibly have. He called Ash an eyesore and turned away, ordering him to be disposed. Something broke inside Ash. With a surge of rage and despair, he lunged forward, slashing at Roderick's neck. He cursed himself for ever believing in him. The blade barely scratched Roderick's skin. In the next instant, chains wrapped around Ash from behind. 2 figures stepped forward, men he had once called brothers. One severed his arm, the other crushed his leg. Ash coughed blood as his body slammed into the ground. His brothers laughed, mocking him, reminding him that a wingless creature was best suited to crawl on the earth. Ash clenched his remaining fist and asked one final question. If Roderick had planned to throw him away regardless, then why had he saved him in the first place? Roderick grabbed Ash by the hair and answered without emotion. He told him not to flatter himself. From the very beginning, he had never had any use for Ash. What he needed was the power of the 7 wings, dwelling within a body. Ash stared at him in disbelief. Roderick continued, stating that Ash's mother had been useful. She had given birth to a seed like Ash solely for his sake. Ash did not understand what he meant. Before he could ask, a sword pierced through his back. Pain flooded his senses as darkness closed in. As consciousness faded, Ash wondered if this was truly how his life would end, and what, if anything, his existence had ever meant. Cold suddenly struck his face. Ash's eyes snapped open. For a fleeting moment, he wondered if this was the afterlife. The freezing wind bit into his skin. His lungs burned with every breath. Then he understood this was reality. He lay in the middle of a raging blizzard, weakly in the arms of a woman. Panic surged through him as he tried to move, and froze. His body felt wrong. Ash felt his legs far too small. He raised his hand before his eyes and stared at it in disbelief.
He was shocked because he was now an infant. When he seized the woman holding him, he realized that she was no longer moving. She was dead. Then Ash activated his search ability. His vision expanded beyond the storm. He sensed 3 mounted figures riding through the snow. They were searching frantically. One of the men shouted loudly, ordering the others to hurry. He declared that for Lord Roderick's sake, they had to recover the infant the woman had taken. Ash's heart nearly stopped. He muttered weakly, questioning if he had heard correctly. Roderick, his father's name. If they were searching for an infant, then there was no doubt who they were after. In his previous life, he had heard rumors that he was picked up on a snowy night just like this. A horrifying realization crept into his mind. Had he returned to the past? The idea sounded absurd, impossible, yet everything pointed to it. The horsemen were drawing closer. Ash knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he stayed here, he would be captured and returned to the house of Elmhine. He would become Roderick's possession once again. Summoning every ounce of will he had, Ash began to crawl. Mana flowed weakly into his tiny hands, pushing his body forward inch by inch. His limbs trembled violently. His breathing became shallow and erratic. Cold seeped into his bones. Heat burned through his veins. His body screamed to stop, but he didn't. Ash crawled because he knew that if he stopped, he would die, and if he lived, one day he would take his revenge on Roderick Elmhine. Time passed in agony. The storm slowly weakened, and the sun began to rise. The baby struggled to crawl more before collapsing unconscious in front of the young girl. A girl shouted that she had called her father and that there was something here. The man behind her was Viscount Hayfried Elmhine, a high-ranking noble. The man lifted Ash carefully into his arms, confusion etched across his face. He muttered in disbelief, questioning why there was a baby in a place like this. Then his eyes fell upon the trail in the snow. A long, uneven path of tiny crawl marks stretched across the frozen ground. The Viscount froze, staring at the distance the infant had crawled through the blizzard. He whispered in shock, questioning what kind of child could have survived something like this, and who exactly this baby truly was. Some time later, Ash drifted in a strange dream. A red-haired baby appeared before him, toddling closer with an innocent face. Before Ash could react, the child suddenly pinched his nose. Ash jolted awake. The first thing he saw was chaos. 5 little girls surrounded him, their faces glowing with excitement as they reached out all at once. Tiny hands grabbed at his sleeves, even his legs, each of them trying to snatch him away to play. He had no idea what was happening or why his life had suddenly turned into this. Just as he was about to be overwhelmed, the white-haired girl from earlier, clearly the eldest, stepped in. With a stern expression, she scooped Ash up and pulled him away from her sisters, scolding them for going too far. But Ash wriggled free. The moment his feet touched the floor, he began to crawl. Behind him, the small red-haired girl called out excitedly. The next instant, all 5 girls started chasing him. Ash panicked. He had no idea why they were suddenly after him, or why his instincts were screaming danger. Without thinking, mana surged through his tiny body. His eyes glowed gold. A burst of magic erupted from his back. In the blink of an eye, Ash lifted off the ground. He was flying. Ash didn't understand what he was doing. He had no control. His body spun helplessly as he shot upward toward the ceiling. Just before disaster struck, a strong pair of arms caught him mid-air. The man muttered in disbelief that the child had fallen from the sky, and remarked that Ash truly was the strange one. As Ash stared at him, recognition hit him. This man was Viscount Hayfried Elmhine, Roderick Elmhine's older brother. The realization sent a chill through Ash's soul. Hayfried, head of the Viscount family, a branch of House Elmhine. In the past, Hayfried and Roderick had been known as the twin pillars that protected the royal family. Ashe clearly remembered that this Viscount and his entire household had perished in a future civil war. That alone confirmed it. Ashe had truly returned to the past. Ashe sighed inwardly, bitterly amused by fate. He had tried to escape the ducal house, only to be found by another branch of the same bloodline. Soon after, Ashe found himself in the arms of the Viscount's wife. She spoke gently, remarking that the baby's magic had gone berserk and caused him to fly. She admitted that she had known from the start that he was no ordinary child. Seeing his cute face, she smiled softly. Then she gave him a gentle kiss, whispering that it must have been frightening, but that he was safe now. Ashe froze. He had never experienced warmth like this. From the side, Viscount Hayfried watched them quietly. After a moment, he spoke with certainty, stating that the child possessed
calmly, saying that this reaction reflected the Viscount house's current standing. Stopping before the massive gates, he turned to Astor and said he wanted his son to see this clearly. He asked whether Astor felt disappointed by their situation. Asterin smiled. He replied that this level of chills suited him just fine. Hayfried chuckled, clearly pleased, and said that hearing that was comforting. As they stood before the towering castle, Astor's thoughts drifted back to his past life when he had been the disgrace of House Elmhine. His first appearance in high society back then had been the worst possible debut. This place was filled with bitter memories. But now things were different. With the 7 wings within him, he was no longer the same person. Asterin's gaze sharpened with quiet determination. This time, he would change his fate. The family began walking toward the imposing castle entrance. From a high window, 2 young men watched their arrival with open contempt. They were the same brothers who had tormented him in his previous life. Asterin noticed them. His expression did not waver. With steady steps, the 3 parties continued toward the grand entrance, each carrying their own intentions. Inside his mind, Asterin made a silent vow. This time, he would make a dazzling debut in high society. Inside, at the center of the main hall, stood an arena where 2 young swordsmen were locked in a fierce clash. The narration explained that this was an era ruled by knights. A true knight required both power and grace. Power was proven through swordsmanship. Grace was measured through reputation and fame. Steel rang against steel as the duel intensified, both youths displaying refined fencing techniques. Just as they prepared to clash once more, something changed. A glowing wing crest suddenly appeared on one fighter's wrist. In an instant, he overwhelmed his opponent, slicing cleanly through his sword and ending the duel decisively. The crowd erupted in cheers. The ultimate symbol of both power and grace had revealed itself, the wing crest. From the balcony above, Alfin whispered that the atmosphere was overwhelming. She remarked that she finally understood why her sister's friend and Flair had refused to attend. Beside her, Astor stared silently at the arena. Memories from his past life resurfaced. Laughter, humiliation, and the moment he had been defeated and mocked during a duel. His gaze grew distant. Alfin noticed and called his name, asking if he was nervous about his first sword dance assembly. Asterin smiled and replied that he wasn't nervous. Inwardly, he thought that the feeling was closer to nostalgia. Alfin looked confused, unable to understand his words. Their father, Viscount Hayfried Elmhine, informed them that he was leaving for a meeting and instructed Astor to look after Alfin. She protested loudly, claiming she was more capable than him, while Astor calmly called her clumsy. With a hand on his son's shoulder, the Viscount smiled and advised him to make connections, reminding him that many nobles his age were present. Then he leaned closer and whispered a warning. "Don't let anyone know about the 7 wings." After his father left, Astor reflected on the advice.
He noticed hostile gazes from other noble children watching from afar, and wondered how he was supposed to make friends when everyone clearly despised him. Still, with a determined expression, he decided to follow his father's words. When Alfin asked where he was going, Asterin replied confidently that he was going to make some friends. Downstairs, a group of noble youths lounged casually around the sofa. Seated upon it were the two sons of Duke Rodri. As Aster approached them, one of the boys looked him up and down mockingly and demanded to know who he was. Asterin greeted him calmly, addressing him as brother-in-law Darius, which startled the group. With a polite smile, he introduced himself as Aster Elmhine, the younger brother from the Viscount house. He explained that he had seen them earlier and simply came over to greet them. Darius's brother sneered, remarking that Aster was merely the adopted son of the Viscount family. Darius laughed cruelly, saying he now understood why Aster shamelessly called himself an Elmhine. Asterin remembered them clearly, Darius and Grian, the two legitimate heirs of House Elmhine, the same two who had ended his life in the past. With a darkened gaze, Asterin reflected that once they seemed terrifying. Now they looked like children pretending to be grown men. His resolve sharpened. Suddenly, Alfin grabbed Asterin's arm and urged him to leave. At that moment, Darius called her name. She froze, terrified. Darius mocked her, asking whether she wasn't going to hide behind her father today. He ordered her to come closer and entertain them. Alfin refused, stating that their families had no master-servant relationship. She pulled Asterin away, but her trembling hand betrayed her fear. Darius continued, insulting Viscount High-Reed Elmhine, accusing him of failing to protect the king, and mocking how his own younger brother had severed his arm as punishment. Alfin snapped, screaming for him to take it back. Darius responded by spitting his drink directly into her face, humiliating her in front of everyone. He sneered that her father must be disappointed to have such a useless daughter, one unworthy of inheriting even a barony. He mocked her attire, telling her to dress properly next time if she didn't want to get soaked, suggesting she wear rags instead. Alfin broke down in tears. From behind them, Aster felt his emotions surge. He thought seeing them again wouldn't anger him. He was wrong. In one swift motion, Aster snatched a wine bottle from one of Darius's companions. Alfin gasped as Aster placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Darius scoffed until Aster hurled the bottle toward Darius. He caught it with ease. In the same breath, Aster's sword flashed, slicing the bottle cleanly in midair. Wine splashed over Darius's face. The hall fell silent. Calmly, Aster licked his finger into the remaining wine on his blade. After testing it, he remarked casually that it was just grape juice, then added with a faint smile that it suited a spoiled little noble like Darius. A flashback then surfaced 3 years earlier. Golden light erupted violently from Asterin's body. The aura was terrifying, dense, radiant, and unstable. Viscount High-Reed Elmhine shouted for him to hold on. He demanded to know whether Asterin intended to kill his sisters. One sister lay unconscious on the ground. The others stood frozen in terror, unable to approach as the golden black energy raged uncontrollably. The Viscount ordered Asterin to pull himself together. Staring at the overwhelming aura, Hifra muttered to himself, "This is the true power of the 7 wings." He had never imagined such a dangerous force could be sealed within a child. For the first time, doubt crept into his heart. He questioned whether this power could truly be controlled by anyone. Looking straight at Asterin, surrounded by the violent aura, the Viscount asked him quietly whether he believed he could control it. The scene snapped back to the present. A guard burst into the meeting hall where the main and branch families of House Elmhine were gathered. Shouting about an emergency, the guard interrupted the discussion. One of the dukes demanded an explanation for the interruption. The messenger revealed that 2 sons of House Elmhine, one from the main family and one from the branch family, were currently dueling. Shock spread through the hall. Without hesitation, Viscount High-Reed Elmhine rushed toward the arena. At the same time, Ulfin ran toward her father, trying desperately to explain what had happened. From the balcony overlooking the main hall, a duke watched the arena with interest and a faint smile. Below them, Asterin and Darius stood locked in combat at the center of the arena, surrounded by stunned onlookers. The Duke remarked that a brotherly feud within the mighty House Elmhine was not something one witnessed often. Other dukes joined him at the balcony, observing carefully. A bearded duke stroked his chin and noted that depending on how this duel ended, the sword dance assembly could easily turn ugly. In the arena, Darius activated his wing crest. Power surged around him as he sneered, calling Aster a fool for daring to challenge a ducal heir. He mocked Aster as a mongrel born in the wild, someone who didn't even understand the difference in power. Darius revealed his four-wing crest, letting its radiance blaze for all to see. The younger nobles erupted in cheers, muttering that it was only natural for a ducal heir to stand on a completely different level. With a taunting grin, Darius demanded that Aster reveal his own wing crest. He asked whether he was too ashamed to show it. Asterin replied calmly that proudly showing off a mere pattern was not his style. With a confident smirk, he added that doing something so embarrassing wasn't something he could bring himself to do. The response sent Darius into a furious rage. Asterin proposed a wager. If Asterin won, Darius would apologize publicly. Darius laughed and countered that if he won, Aster would become his dog. Then Darius lunged forward, shouting that he would work Aster for the rest of his life. Their swords collided with explosive force. Aster blocked the blow flawlessly, his posture calm and unwavering. Yet he could feel it, the raw power behind Darius's attacks. As Darius prepared his next strike, his blade glowed with mana. He boasted loudly about the strength granted by his wing crest and unleashed a barrage of strikes. Aster remained on the defensive, blocking each blow precisely. From the balcony above, Ulfin cried out her brother's name in fear. The bearded duke commented that Darius's swordsmanship was still immature, but he added that technique mattered little in the face of overwhelming mana.
Aster remarked that all those years had been nothing more than preparation to seize the chance to crush him. With overwhelming force, Aster pressed forward. Darius crossed both swords to block, but the impact drove him to one knee. Gillian, Darius's own brother, couldn't believe his eyes. The idea that Darius, the pride of the main family, was being pushed back so completely was unthinkable. Darius muttered in disbelief, reminding Aster that he possessed four wings. Aster said nothing. He simply poured more mana into his sword. A sharp crack echoed across the arena. A fracture spread across Darius's blade. The nobles watching couldn't believe it. The duel had become completely one-sided. Whispers rippled through the crowd. House Elmhine still had a monster like this. Black and gold aura began to surge violently from Aster's body, twisting together like a storm. On the balcony, Viscount Highfried clenched his fist, realizing this was turning dangerous. Darius was completely overwhelmed. In Aster's mind, memories surfaced. Darius's mocking laughter from his past life, the blade that had ended him, the humiliation, the pain, the power of the seven wings roared. Aster stepped forward, ready to end it. From the balcony, his father shouted for him to stop, urging control. Aster halted at the last possible moment. His final strike landed. Both of Darius's swords shattered cleanly in half and clattered to the ground. Silence consumed the arena. Darius collapsed, frozen in terror, staring at Aster's blade embedded in the ground just inches from his third shank. His legs trembled uncontrollably as he lost all dignity. Aster looked down at him and spoke coldly. He remarked that next time Darius should come dressed properly, because if he was going to spill wine on others, he should be prepared to get soaked himself. Then Aster turned away. Quietly, he muttered to himself that he was no longer Ash the Wingless. That realization alone was enough for now. From the balcony, his sister met his gaze and gave him a proud, satisfied smile. Aster returned it with a bright face. Suddenly, Aster felt a terrifying aura surge from behind him, emanating from the staircase. Someone was releasing their aura in pure rage. Aster instantly spun around, only to see none other than his former father, Roderick Elmhine, the head of the main family. The entire hall went tense. Even Aster felt the pressure weighing down on him. When Roderick finally withdrew his aura, whispers spread through the crowd. No one could believe it. The youngest son of a Viscount family had actually managed to defeat the main family's third son. This was no longer a minor incident. Everyone knew there was no way the main family would stay silent after such humiliation. Roderick stepped forward. Aster remained calm, his posture steady, already prepared for what was to come. Darius's face lit up with twisted joy. He staggered to his feet and clutched at his father's robes, laughing cruelly as he spoke, calling Aster a bastard who dared to defy the main family, despite being nothing more than a filthy half-blood. He begged his father to use his power and crush him. Roderick did not even look at Aster. Instead, his gaze turned ice-cold as he stared at Darius. Without warning, Roderick drove the sheath of his sword straight through his own son's hand. A sickening crack echoed as Darius's palm slammed into the floor. He screamed in agony. The hall erupted in shock. Gillian stood frozen, unable to believe what he had just seen. Roderick's voice was calm but merciless. He asked why a loser of a duel was laughing so shamelessly after dragging the family name through the mud. He raised his sword and declared that one who could not even avenge himself had no right to wield a blade. From the balcony, Viscount Hyfried on Elmhine shouted for his brother to stop, but the room fell in complete silence. Aster had stepped forward, standing directly in the path of Roderick's sword. Roderick asked what Aster thought he was doing. Aster replied evenly that his cousin had yet to apologize to his sister, and that his punishment could wait until after that was done. Roderick's aura exploded outward. He snarled that an orphan picked up by Hyfried dared to stand before him, and asked whether Aster truly believed he had become a member of House Elmhine without sharing its blood. Aster did not flinch. He stated that he was the Viscount's son, blood or not. He had learned from his father the pride of a knight and the weight carried by a family name. Roderick's gaze flicked briefly towards Hyfried on the balcony. Then his expression hardened. He declared that as a member of the Viscount's family, Aster had brought needless disgrace upon the honor of the main house. He invoked the prestige of the Elmhine name, the pillar of 12,000 knights, and the sword of the king, and said such an offense could not be dismissed as a childish quarrel. The dukes of the branch families watched intently, eager to see how this would unfold. Roderick continued, reminding Aster that his father had once sacrificed an arm as compensation for disloyalty. He demanded to know what Aster was willing to offer in return. Aster answered without hesitation. This had not been a sibling quarrel. It was a legitimate duel. He had merely answered insult with his sword. He repeated Roderick's own words back to him. Those who cannot take revenge for themselves have no right to pick up a blade. And then, coldly, Aster declared that he had no intention of losing even a single finger. On the balcony, Alphen clenched her teeth, listening to every word her brother spoke. The bearded duke stared in shock. The blue-haired duke burst into laughter, unable to believe the one standing against Roderick Elmhine was only 10 years old. Roderick stared at Aster in silence for a long moment. Then, slowly, he slid his sword back into his sheath. He declared that Aster should take his stance. Aster did not understand what Roderick meant, but obeyed. In the next instant, a blade flashed. Aster was sent flying. His body smashed into the far wall outside the arena with a deafening crash. Stone cracked beneath the impact. Alphen screamed. From the balcony, Viscount Hyfried shouted his brother's name in fury and leapt down, his sword drawn as he rushed to strike Roderick.
Roderick intercepted the blow easily, blocking Hefried's attack without even shifting his footing. Hefried abandoned the clash and rushed towards Aster instead, calling his son's name in panic. What he saw made his breath catch. Aster was standing, his sword had been shattered, his body bloodied, yet his posture was firm. His expression had not changed in the slightest. Roderick glanced at him once more, then turned away without another word, Darius following him behind in silence. Aster swayed slightly as he steadied himself. Hefried reached him at once, supporting his body. Aster spoke calmly, telling his father that he had kept his word, his promise and everything else. Hefried answered quietly that he had seen it. He told Aster that he had been magnificent. As Roderick steps at the balcony, the bearded duke commented that Roderick's action had been rather childish. However, he admitted that allowing the boy to leave unchallenged would have caused the main family to lose face entirely. He added that standing before Roderick Elmhine himself, making such a bold declaration and surviving was no small feat. That child, he said, was a rising star. With a smile, the Duke remarked that for Aster, this had been the best possible debut in high society. The heavy-set Duke let out a breath and said the boy had frightened him. For a moment, he truly thought House Elmhine might split down the middle. Roderick glanced at his brother and Aster. He stated that an era of upheaval would eventually come, a storm fierce enough to tear the world into 2 or even 3 pieces. The scene shifted to the training arena of the Viscount House of Elmhine. Several knights stood watch as a training session unfolded. 2 of them sparred with wooden swords. With an easy smile, the knight praised his master's performance, calling it splendid. The one he praised was Aster. The surrounding knights murmured among themselves, remarking that Aster's swordsmanship was terrifying for someone of his age. They noted that his training had grown even more intense since the sword dance assembly. One knight recalled how Aster had defeated the 3rd son of Elmhine family, and the group could not hide their satisfaction. The main family had looked down on the Viscount house for years, and seeing one of their own stand tall against them felt deeply refreshing. As Aster continued defeating opponent after opponent, his thoughts drifted inward. At the sword dance assembly, he had shown enough power and presence to silence those who called his family a disgrace of House Elmhine. Yet he knew the real hurdle still lay ahead, the Elmhine main house. He wished he could have tested himself further on that stage, against more opponents. Even now, he understood that at his current level, he stood no chance of defeating Roderick Elmhine. To Aster, a wing crest was nothing more than an indicator of magical potential. Inborn magic was a useless treasure if one could not fully master it, and even now he could not draw out the full power of the 7 wings. If only he did not have to fear losing control, going berserk, he could truly test the limits of that power. With a final exchange, Aster defeated the last knight standing.
Flowed on its own, smooth, natural, unstoppable. Inside the castle, knights at the training grounds looked up as a massive red streak of light tore across the sky. One knight muttered in disbelief, asking if a comet had fallen. Another snapped back, calling him an idiot and pointing out that the light had come from the opposite direction. Althen also noticed the blazing trail. She whispered quietly that it had to be Aster. Back in the forest, Aster sat on the ground. A faint smile spread across his face as he murmured that it was an unbelievable weapon. Highfried, however, was still staring at the sky. He said softly that what was truly unbelievable was Aster himself. He continued, stating that in all the history of House Elmhine, even tracing the bloodline through countless generations, there had never been a single individual who bore the crest of 7 wings. And Highfried declared that if Aster fully mastered that power, he would one day surpass even him and Roderick Elmhine, despite their 6 wings. The thought struck Aster deeply, to surpass the head of the Elmhine family. His father's voice grew serious.
He warned that power of such magnitude would inevitably give birth to conflict. If it became known that Aster possessed 7 wings, some would envy him, others would resent him, many would scheme to use him, and some would seek to erase him as an obstacle. Highfried extended his hand. He told Aster that so he would never again regret his own helplessness. When that day came, he must grow strong. Aster took his father's hand firmly. Inwardly, he vowed that he would never live another miserable life like his past one. Aloud, he thanked his father. He swore that he would master both the 7 wings and this world itself. The scene then shifted to 3 days later. The Viscount family welcomed the return of their elder daughters. Malfa and Kudo had finally come home. Kudo stepped forward first, wearing a bright smile as she extended her arms toward her younger sisters. She announced cheerfully that it was time for a reunion hug with their beloved big sister. Instead, both girls ran straight past her and embraced Malfa. Kudo froze in place, visibly stunned. She demanded to know why they were not hugging her. The 2 sisters replied innocently that it was because Sister Kudo always messed up their hair. Kudo immediately denied the accusation, declaring that she had mastered chivalry to perfection and would never do something so unrefined. Then she noticed Alphen standing quietly to the side. Without warning, Kudo pulled Alphen into a tight embrace, praising her for being a good girl while simultaneously ruffling and completely ruining her hair. She demanded to know why Alphen had not come to her first. Soon after, Malfa asked their parents where Aster was. They explained the situation briefly, mentioning his training. Kudo, who had been listening closely, grew curious as well. The scene shifted to the forest. Aster stood alone, gripping the hilt of Graham. His teeth were clenched as golden mana flickered around the incomplete blade. He muttered that it was still not enough. He could now form the sword using magic, but suppressing its power was all he could manage. Compared to his father's effortless display, the gap felt overwhelming. He questioned inwardly how had his father done it so easily. A voice came from behind him. Kudo remarked that it looked flashy. Aster turned, surprised, and asked if Sister Kudo had returned. Kudo smiled faintly. She commented that Aster had not even shown up to greet her returning sister, calling it awfully cold. She asked whether they were not worth his attention, or if he believed himself special now. She added that she had heard everything about what happened at the sword dance assembly. Even at the Knight Academy, people were talking about him. She noted that their father must be proud. Aster replied calmly that he had also heard about Kudo's achievements. Despite still being a trainee, she had excelled in numerous missions and been awarded the Platinum Order, this year's honorary Knight Medal. Kudo acknowledged it without hesitation, stating that despite all of this, she still could not inherit their father's position. After a brief pause, she asked whether it was true that Aster had declined the matter of succession. Inwardly, Aster wondered who had told her. He suspected their father, and he immediately sensed trouble. Outwardly, he replied that it had not been his intention. He simply believed that he lacked the qualifications for now. Kudo stepped forward, her voice lowered as she said that both Aster and their father knew exactly what her dream was. She accused them of being cruel. She drew her sword. Before Aster could react, Kudo slashed through a nearby tree and hurled the massive trunk toward him. Aster leapt aside, narrowly avoiding it, and shouted at her, demanding to know what she was doing. Kudo replied calmly that it had been a while, and suggested that her little brother let her big sister test him. She smiled and warned that she wouldn't hold back next time. Aster told her to stop. He said that his sword was still incomplete. Kudo asked coldly whether he would make the same excuse when facing an enemy on the battlefield. Aster fell silent. She stated that a knight must consider himself on the battlefield. If Aster held back too much, she warned, she might crush him. With that, Kudo leapt into the air. Aster realized this was no joke. He was barely managing to control his magic as it was, but he knew he had no choice. He poured his mana into Graham, because he understood one thing perfectly. If he didn't, Sister Kudo would truly try to kill him. Their clash continued deep inside the forest, the violent shock waves visible even from afar as bursts of light and pressure rippled through the trees. Kudo clicked her tongue as she swung her sword again, her expression sharp and unrelenting. She remarked that Aster was still just as sharp with the blade as ever, adding that she never imagined he could keep up with her swordsmanship after she had leveled up so much at the Knight Academy. Aster blocked her strikes one after another, the impact reverberating through his arms. She continued, asking what kind of excuse that sword thing was supposed to be. Before he could fully finish, Kudo twisted her stance and hurled him backward with overwhelming force. She coldly declared that his control of mana was absolutely pathetic. Aster slid back, but managed to maintain his footing, his boots digging into the earth. He looked up at her and remarked that she was as merciless as ever, just like he remembered. Inwardly, his thoughts drifted back to the past. Kudo had always been this way. As the only man in the family with the right to inherit, and as someone who possessed a wing crest superior to anyone else in the household, he was always a thorn in her existence. To Kudo, everything about him was unfair. She was a storm that picked fights over every perceived injustice. If I had to put it bluntly, she was her natural enemy. Suddenly, Kudo leapt high into the air. The moment Aster saw her rise, he knew exactly what was coming. She slammed her sword down with crushing force, the collision sending a violent shockwave through the forest floor. Kudo stared down at him and declared that he was not worthy of becoming the next head of the family. The scene shifted to their father's room. Alphen stood near the window, visibly anxious. She asked her father if it was really okay to leave those two alone, pointing out that at worst, someone could actually die in a fight between siblings. Highfried responded calmly that the two of them were good rivals. He admitted they might be reckless, but stated firmly that it wouldn't come to that. Still worried, Alphen said she hoped he was right. After a brief pause, she asked her father why he had called them back from the Knight Academy in the first place. She could sense that it wasn't just to discuss succession. Highfried opened a drawer and took something out. The moment Alphen saw it, her breath caught. It was a sealed envelope of the Elmheim family. Her father explained that it was a summons from the Elmheim main family. He added that it seemed the old men who controlled the core of the family wished to see their grandchild face to face. Quietly, Alphen asked if it was really that serious. Highfried answered without hesitation. At worst, he said, they could lose Aster. Their fight continued deep within the forest, blades colliding again and again as shock waves rippled through the trees. As they exchanged blows, Aster spoke, stating that she should stop saying such foolish things. He reminded her that he had already refused the succession and that she knew it. Kudo raised her sword high, her expression twisting with irritation. She replied that this was exactly what she found unacceptable. She brought her blade down with crushing force. Aster barely managed to catch the blow with his sword. The impact was immense, far heavier than he expected. It felt less like fighting a swordsman and more like facing a troll swinging a massive, unrefined warhammer. Kudo poured even more strength into the strike. At the last moment, Aster twisted his wrist and flipped his blade. Kudo's attack slammed into the ground instead. An asked her sharply whether she would finally listen to me. Kudo smiled faintly and asked if he was already trying to run away. In the next instant, she released her brute strength without restraint. Aster was sent flying sideways and crashed into a tree.
The bark shattered behind him as he coughed up blood, his eyes wide with disbelief. Kudo looked down at him and declared that if all he did was swing a sword, then he was